NASCAR the night breathing down your neck. You had Brett Cruz doing crazy moves. How did you hold them off to win this race?
Yeah, man, that was awesome. It's been a tough past few weeks for me in the Cup Series, and feels good to come back down here and into the O'Reilly Series and remember that I can still do it.
A 19-year-old kid from Charlotte, North Carolina, had just stared down a two-time Cup Series champion in his rearview mirror with fresher tires at Bristol Motor Speedway on a night that seemed owned by that champion and still refused to give him a way through. That is what unfolded on Saturday night. And if you have not been watching Connor Zilisch, this is the moment you are going to want to begin.
Yeah, there's not much more intimidating than seeing Kyle Larson in your mirror with 5-10 laps to go, and he's got fresher tires. So really grateful for the entire Junior Motorsports team, the Hendrick Engine Shop, everybody who makes this happen. Roto-Rooter was on board today. They've been a big supporter of mine, and it's cool to get Rodney Childers his first win with JRM as well. So yeah, we were able to close it out there and made a bold call to stay out and get ourselves track position, and it paid off.
How does it feel to get your first Bristol win?
Amazing. This place is one of a kind, and I've always wanted to win here and get that sword, so it feels good to finally get that.
To understand why what unfolded at Bristol on Saturday night carries the weight that it does, you need to understand what Connor Zilisch was walking into that race carrying. Because Zilisch did not arrive at Bristol Motor Speedway as some fresh-faced kid on a hot streak. He arrived as someone who had spent the first months of his rookie Cup Series season quietly struggling. He was sitting 33rd in the Cup Series standings through the first 7 races of 2026. His average finishing position was 26th. For a driver who the entire sport had spent 2 years calling the most exciting talent to come through NASCAR in a generation, that number stings in ways that are hard to describe. The guy who had won 10 races in a single Xfinity season, who had locked up the 2025 regular season championship before most of his competitors had even found their rhythm, was finishing in the back, week after week. And the hardest thing about that situation is not the results themselves, it is what those results do to your head. Zilisch said it himself after the race on Saturday. He stood there in victory lane, still catching his breath, and told the world,
"It's tough. You finish in the back every week, and you forget who you are. But this feels good. So you know, we played strategy. Rodney made a great call to keep us out. The tires weren't wearing much all night, and we were able to get our Roto-Rooter Chevrolet in the track position that it needed to go out and win the race. So yeah, really cool to be able to race against Kyle and learn from him. He's so talented and such a fast race car driver, and man, it's good to be back with JRM and back in victory lane."
A teenager carrying the burden of expectations that would break most grown men, telling you honestly that he had begun to lose his own identity in the noise. That is not just a racing issue, that is a human issue. And Bristol, loud, relentless, concrete, fast, turned out to be exactly the place where he rediscovered himself again. But before we reach that moment, we need to talk about what Zilisch was actually facing on Saturday night. Because the story of this race is not just a story about Zilisch, it is a story about a race that should have been completely out of his control. Kyle Larson, two-time NASCAR Cup Series champion. He took the lead away from pole sitter William Sawalich on lap 28, and from that moment forward, Bristol Motor Speedway was essentially his personal stage. He swept stage 1, he swept stage 2. By the time the final stage began, Larson had led 230 of the first 269 laps. 230. In a 300-lap race, that is dominance you simply cannot argue with. There was no fluke caution that handed him the lead. There was no mechanical gift from a rival. Larson earned every single one of those laps the old-fashioned way, by being quicker, sharper, and more commanding than everyone else on that racetrack. He was the story of the night, right up until the moment he was not.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I've known his talent for a while. I've seen him in outlaw karts since he was probably 7 or 8 years old, maybe a little bit older, I guess. But yeah, so I knew he's really good. You can tell he studies, you know, because I wasn't sure if he was going to just pound the top in front of me, or if maybe I could get to his outside and do what he was doing. That was my hope, you know, choosing the top, was that I could get outside of him at some point and just get ringing the top. But yeah, he went straight up there right away, and it was really good, and it kind of changed the style of the last run.
With 31 laps remaining in the Suburban Propane 300, Jesse Love sent the lapped car of Gray Goulding spinning through the front stretch, bringing out the caution lights. That was the moment. That was the turning point that shifted everything, because every driver in the field suddenly had a choice to make within seconds, and Kyle Larson chose exactly what most expected him to choose. He pulled off the racing line, dove onto pit road, and took 4 new tires. The stop was fast, the tires were fresh, the strategy was straightforward. Restart third or fourth and attack the pack using fresh Goodyears before Zilisch and others on worn rubber could defend themselves. It made sense. It was, in truth, the correct call by nearly every metric. It simply failed to deliver despite the logic behind it from the outset of the race. It ultimately backfired completely. Then Brent Cruz changed everything at the front. Cruz, a 19-year-old Joe Gibbs Racing rookie in the number 19 Mobile 1 Toyota Supra and lifelong friend of Connor Zilisch dating back to childhood, decided it was time to strike. Running the outside lane through Bristol corners, he found grip others could not match and slowly reeled in Zilisch's rear bumper lap after lap, building momentum for a late charge. With 7 laps remaining, he finally committed to the move. Using the high line through turns 3 and 4, he drew even with Zilisch on the front stretch and powered his Toyota into the lead. Brent Cruz, a rookie at Bristol under the lights in the closing laps of his first potential win, was suddenly in control of the race with victory in sight. For several laps it looked like a storybook ending until Bristol once again refused to cooperate and the wall intervened abruptly. Cruz lost slight rear grip exiting the backstretch. His Toyota drifted just high enough to make contact with the outside barrier, not a heavy crash but enough to break momentum, kill speed and allow the no-one Roto-Rooter Chevrolet to surge back underneath with 6 laps remaining. That moment completely flipped the momentum of the race as Zilisch fought to recover, while Larson surged forward, and the crowd reacted to yet another dramatic Bristol finish unfolding in real time on one of the sport's most unpredictable short tracks under the bright night lights of the last great Coliseum. Once again, Bristol.
One of my best friends when we step foot out of a race suit, and when we get in the car, we are the world's biggest rivals. Not necessarily that we wreck each other or anything, but there's no one on this earth I would rather lose to or want to lose to rather than Connor. I mean, it sucks, but I'm just grateful to be here. Our car was incredible. Our race speed was good during practice, and I apparently need to get better in qualifying. So yeah, I had a great car in the race, was able to run the top really well, made some rookie mistakes there, getting free up into the wall. I feel like if I'd have just kind of backed it up some, I could have helped myself out, but it was tough with Larson breathing down my neck.
Zilisch returned to the lead, and now arrived the moment that tested every nerve in him completely. Larson, who at this stage had carved his way through the entire field on 4 fresh tires, was right behind him still. Not far, not a safe gap, just there, in his mirror, with a car that clearly had more grip, more speed, and a driver with 2 titles who knows Bristol like most people know their own living room exactly. Zilisch had gotten past Cruz cleanly. He attacked the inside lane. He tried to rattle Zilisch into forcing the same mistake Cruz had made. Zilisch defended every single move. When Larson moved to the outside lane, Zilisch followed him, denying the clean run completely. When Larson required Zilisch to keep low for just one more corner to open the outside lane, Zilisch moved up at precisely the right moment and closed the door. Larson, after the race, explained it with honesty that told you everything you needed to know. Exactly.
He did a good job, and so did Brent. So, I figured the pace was going to pick up a lot there. You go for the short run with the top being rubbered in, and knowing that you aren't going to go long run, everybody's going to just run really hard. And to run that hard, I was just a little too free, which they were also kind of in front of me. But
when Kyle Larson openly admits he was the one who made the mistake, the debate about how clean Connor Zilisch's defense was effectively comes to an end. By the time the white flag waved and the final lap started, Zilisch was still out front by 0.8 of a second. That's when the noise from the crowd really swelled, because in that last trip around Bristol Motor Speedway, Larson simply could not reel him in. The fresh tires that were meant to be his deciding advantage had already been used up after just a handful of aggressive laps in pursuit. The grip he needed was gone. Meanwhile, Zilisch, running on tires that had been on his car since before the third stage restart, powered across the finish line first by 0.7 of a second. It marked his 12th career NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series victory, his first win of the 2026 season, and his first triumph at Bristol Motor Speedway. It also became, officially, the first O'Reilly Series win of Rodney Childer's career, a veteran crew chief with a Cup Series championship already to his name, now adding another milestone in his 50s, because the right driver believed in the right strategy at exactly the right moment. Beyond the finish order and the trophy, this win carries a much deeper meaning. Connor Zilisch is just 19 years old, currently in his first full season in what many consider the toughest environment in American motorsport. Moving from a series where he dominated, winning 10 races and a championship, into a field full of seasoned veterans and world-class competition is an enormous leap. Many talented drivers have struggled with that transition, and some have never recovered their confidence. This season had already been a difficult learning curve, with inconsistent results and constant scrutiny over how he would respond under pressure. What Saturday night demonstrated was not only raw pace or a fortunate strategy call from his team, but something far more important. When the pressure reached its peak, with his best friend attacking from behind, a former Cup champion closing in on fresher tires, and Bristol's unforgiving concrete walls waiting for any slip, he did not collapse under it. He did not tighten up or hesitate. He raced. The same driver who recently admitted he had been forgetting who he was in the Cup Series stepped onto one of NASCAR's biggest short-track stages and rediscovered himself. 12 wins into his O'Reilly career, Bristol, the last great Coliseum, now sits on his growing list of achievements. And with momentum like this, the entire NASCAR world is already shifting its focus forward, watching closely to see what he can do when he returns to Bristol for the Cup race on Sunday, because nights like this have a way of changing how a driver is viewed almost instantly.